Today we'll be covering an article called The Responsible Use of Animals in Biomedical Research by Edwin Converse Hedinger. In this article, Hedinger responds directly to an argument made by Carl Cohen in defense of animal research for biomedical ethics, and Cohen was an author that we already covered in class.
Okay, Cohen argues that only human beings can have rights. He believes that in order to have rights, one must be a moral agent. Moral agency is a person's ability to make judgments based on their sense of right and wrong, and to hold themselves accountable. To say that someone has certain rights, someone else who is also a moral agent must use their judgment to treat or not to treat this person in a way that respects their rights. Essentially, Cohen is arguing that for someone to have rights, there needs to be someone with a higher moral agency to grant rights to them.
In response to Cohen's argument, Hedinger agrees that without more psychologically sophisticated moral beings such as humans, there would be no one to grant rights to, say, a pig or dog. However, Hedinger does state that one not need be a moral agent to possess rights, and he gives an example such as a severely disabled infant or human who we would consider to have rights. So he then poses a question that asks, if those who are severely disabled cannot identify moral claims, do they have rights?
In response to this, Cohen would argue yes, because they are of human kindred, and they have the capacity to be moral agents like the rest of their species. Thus, Cohen makes the claim that severely retarded humans, because they are humans, have the capacity for moral agency. He believes that we should treat species by their kind, not by their characteristics.
Hedinger's argument is in direct conflict with Cohen's beliefs. Hedinger argues that many times animals can display much more moral capacity than any severely disabled ever could. And he gives an example of help dogs who display qualities of obedience, protectiveness, and solicitousness, while there are severely disabled humans who could never achieve these characteristics despite our best efforts. Hedinger then asks, even if there is a moral capacity that could be present in severely disabled humans, if it never develops, how can we put disabled humans' non-existent capacity above animals who do show capacity?
Cohen's response to this would be that moral status is to be determined by species membership and not by individual qualities. Species membership by itself is a morally legitimate reason for treating individuals differently. Cohen's arguments are that of a speciesist, and he embraces this title, arguing that speciesism is essential for understanding where our obligations lie in regards to the organisms around us.
Hedinger goes on to cite Peter Singer and other philosophers who believe that individual qualities are just as, if not more, important than biological kind. Their main argument against speciesism, and throughout this article, is that just because there are moral differences between species does not mean that we can treat each species different accordingly. They argue against speciesism in that species advocate for treatment or different treatment on morally illegitimate grounds such as racists and sexists. And these authors do not reject that there are relevant differences between members of different species. However, they argue that they argue against Cohen in stating that there are differences that should not be justifiable reasons to treat individuals differently. Just as rejecting sexism or racism rejects the ideal of discriminating on solely the grounds of their sex or race, you should not discriminate against species solely because of their biological kind. These authors also differentiate between speciesism and racism and sexism in that species have broader differences between one another than does one gender from the other or between different races. Thus, they argue that justifying differential treatment on the grounds of speciesism alone or the differences between species is not as objectionable as racism and sexism. And Hedinger provides the example that states different living environments that would be required for species versus different sexes or races, such as different species require a vast number of living environments, and the differences between their adaptations are much broader than, say, a male or a female who could coincide in the same living environment or habitat, and same with other races.
Our argument. Another argument we found against species is one that says differentiating based on species should be irrelevant because it is not something we chose. As humans, we did not choose to be more sophisticated moral beings. We should not be rewarded for our species since it was not something we ourselves achieved. Likewise, other species should not be looked down upon because of biological occurrences that are out of their control.
A different approach to evaluating the ethical boundaries of animal research is through a utilitarian lens. Hedinger uses utilitarianism, which by definition is the doctrine that actions are right if they are useful or for the benefit of the majority. So in regards to animal experimentation, according to Hedinger, utilitarianists are opposed to animal experimentation, not because the rights of animals being used are violated, but because the overall good that results from experimenting on animals is not sufficient enough to justify their negative consequences. It does not justify the pain and suffering that animals have to endure.
Cohen, however, rejects this by stating that the interests of humans and animals shouldn't be given equal moral weight. According to Cohen, the benefits of using animal research, including the increase of longevity, the avoidance of great pain, saving of lives, and improvement of the quality of lives for humans and animals, are so great that refraining from using animals for research on utilitarian grounds is morally wrong.
So Hedinger disagrees with Cohen by saying that achievements in knowledge of science in medicine does not outweigh the negative effects of animal suffering and death. Hedinger believes that the difference in the pains of animal versus humans is not morally relevant. According to him, the greater psychological sophistication of the human, as in a greater intelligence and consciousness, makes it possible for a greater degree of pain and suffering of a human being. And even though this pain and suffering could be minimized or is minimized by animal research or animal experimentation, this does not discount the pain and suffering of an animal. But yeah, it must still count the pain and suffering of animals equally with the pain and suffering of humans.
Hedinger's arguments against speciesism and his favor for utilitarianism is not meant to fully eradicate the use of animals for medical research. Instead, Hedinger suggests that we use animal research when it is necessary or when the pain and suffering of an animal would be less significant than that of a human, but also highly encourages alternative forms of research that Cohen entirely dismisses.
Since substitution techniques are not sufficiently developed, we cannot fully cease the use of animals in medical research and experimentation. So Cohen continues to believe that there will never be a substitution to replace animals, but a report by the U.S. Congress Office of Technology Assessment proves that substitutions are possible and underway and would be more beneficial for utilitarian purposes to replace animal research.
The OTA report suggests 1. Coordinating investigations and sharing information to reduce duplicative experiments when necessary for validating the original research. 2. Replacing the use of higher animals with lower animals, such as invertebrates, or cold-blooded for warm-blooded animals. 3. Using plants instead of animals. 4. Sharing animals, i.e. getting several tissues from one animal. 5. Designing experiments which use statistical inferences and whose design provides reliable information despite the use of fewer animals. 6. Decreasing the pain and distress in animal experimentation by altering the experimental design and using anesthetics and tranquilizers. 7. Using non-living chemical and physical systems that mimic biological functions. 8. Using humans and animal cadavers. And 9. Teaching by demonstration instead of by individual student use of animals.